Welcome to the Rustic Anchor Woodworks channel, and on this episode I'm going to show you how to build this restoration hardware style coffee table without using 2x4s, 2x6s, 2x2s, you know, that building material that's super popular right now. This is just as easy and you're going to love it, so stay tuned. Before starting any project, I like to ensure my blades are cutting 90 degrees. So I use this Klein digital gauge. So here I'm just taking some 3/4 inch poplar and I am cutting the ends off to length, and I am using a jointing jig on my table saw to true one edge before I rip them down to width. So I know what you're thinking. Poplar for a coffee table top? Yeah, I know, right? But trust me, it's gonna turn out pretty nice when I get this nice stain put on and all finished. So just bear with me. So here I'm just laying out the table or the coffee top orientation. I made sure all the grain were reversing in pattern, and then I'm just using this little doweling jig just to drill out some dowel holes before I assemble it all. So nothing too difficult going on here. I'm just getting these boards laid out, and then I will put some glue on the dowel pins, knock them into place, and then glue the edge of the boards, tap them in, and then squeeze them and clamp them in the parallel clamps there. So the really important thing about this is you want to make sure that your boards and board, when they're all put together, is flat on your clamps. And you can see me just putting all my weight on them before I tighten them down. And I'm going to check a couple times and I'll readjust them just to make sure I get a nice flat glue up. And, you know, it works. I mean, there's a lot of different methods. There's better methods than this, but it's done me well. So I've only been working like 45 minutes at this point, but I am like sweating profusely, like I just jumped out of a swimming pool. It's just so hot and nasty in my garage. But oh well, I'll just keep pushing through to make my wife happy with this coffee table. Anyways, here I am cutting down some 1.75 by 3/4 inch poplar. This is going to be the apron pieces that attach to the leg, and that will attach to the top. And yeah, I know I used dowel pins for the glue up on the top, but for the aprons connecting to the legs, I'm kind of taking a shortcut and using some pocket holes. And everybody's favorite part of woodworking, sanding. So I won't take too terribly long recording this and showing you guys because it's boring. But just make sure you sand all sides. So here are the legs that my wife picked out. They are pine legs, and I got them off the Carolina Leg Company. I gotta admit, like, they're pretty reasonable. They shipped them to Hawaii, where we live, for pretty reasonable too. And they were just all perfect. I didn't have really any blemishes on them. They were ready to paint. I was pretty happy with it. So here are those aprons that I'm going to be attaching, and I used some 1/2 inch cove molding because I wanted a little bit more detail. And my wife's like, "You're not going to see it under there." I'm like, I know, but when I do bend over to pick up something I dropped on the floor, I'm going to see it. And I'll be like, wow, yeah, that's a nice touch. You can do it, you cannot. I just liked it. So here I'm making a little jig so I can evenly space this apron against, on all 4 legs, right? So I'm not like guessing and running these screws down. Whoa, did you catch that? My wife just slipped me a little sandwich wrap and some chips. What a lovely lady. Or she's just being super nice because I'm building her the coffee table she wanted and designed. Either way, I appreciate it. All right, so here's that jig that I set up, and I just added a little extension piece. I clamp one side, I make sure it's square, I put a little bit of glue on the edge of the bonnet, and run those pocket screws right in there. And like I said before, they're going to be nice and squared and evenly spaced out. I need to find some like good audio music background so when I have nothing to say, like here, I could just do some filler music and you guys will be pretty happy. But I just don't right now. But look, here's that jig again, attaching the other leg to the other side of the bonnet. Key point, make sure you're orienting your legs correctly on each leg, right? Maybe one you flip it upside down, you're like, dang it, I screwed up and now I gotta fix it, right? So just keep that in mind. It's just a dumb mistake. I almost did it. So I ran inside. I'm like, hey, wife, what do you want? Up or down? Which way do you want these? So I'm adding some of that poplar that's 1.75 inches wide as support runners here. And I typically don't cut them out. Like I don't pre-cut them out, during my planning. I'll build the frame and then I'll measure it just to make sure it's accurate, and then I'll cut it out. Here we go. That is the top support, the top frame of this coffee table. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, but who doesn't want a bigger shop, bigger tools, more rollers, like a longer outfeed table? And here I just need an extra set of hands to cut out this 4x8 sheet of 3/4 inch maple plywood. And so I ripped it, and here I am cross-cutting it to dimensions. And this is going to be the bottom of the coffee table, the bottom shelf. So I measured the width from one leg to the other and the length from one leg to the other, and that was this dimension. You're going to see here it's going to fit perfectly width and length. So to attach this, nothing special. This is all going to be hidden, but just put a little bit of glue on the bottom of the leg, drill some pilot holes, and then I'm running them down with some Torx screws. So like I said, nothing fancy. You're not going to see it. The foot is actually going to cover all this, and it's going to be a couple inches off the ground. So with the last leg or two, don't feel scared to lift the plywood up to squeeze some glue in there before you screw it down. You're not going to hurt it. But hey, look, taking a little break on the job. My friend came over chatting about some things, showing him the coffee table, talking about what we're doing this weekend, playing golf, maybe hitting the gym. I don't know. But back to work for me. So here are these little legs that my wife picked out. They have some bolts in the bottom of them. They're about 1.5 inches tall. We got them at Lowe's, if I remember correctly. So how I figured to put these on, I put my speed square squarely against the leg and that plywood, and then I just pressed down and indented the plywood, and I put a little dot right in the middle of that impression, and that's where I drilled my pilot hole down. So this is one of those kind of spots where you could take two different approaches. You'll notice that these feet are bigger than the base of that 3.5 inch leg, right? Some might say, I don't like the look of that thing. Okay, fine. Some might say, hey, cut it down to 3.5 inches, like this foot, so it looks like this leg is going through the bottom shelf, right? That looks really nice. Whatever you prefer. My wife preferred not cutting them down. Hey, I'm fine with that, right? Happy wife, happy life. But anyways, to screw these on, like I said, pilot hole. Then I stepped up the bit to match the little thread cert. And then I screwed the thread cert on that bolt of the foot. And I pressed down, got it started, twisted it till it was tight. Gave another 90-degree turn, and it all lined up perfectly. And I was super happy with it. So here's another little detail that I did, and you can choose something else, but you're going to want to cover that plywood, right? And this gives it another nice touch. So I found this molding at, I think Lowe's. I think I got all my stuff at Lowe's this time. But anyways, I found this molding at Lowe's. And I thought, hey, it's not too big and obnoxious. It's just right. So I went with it. And this was Oh, I could be way off. Off the top of my head, I want to say it was maple. Could be wrong. Maybe you guys can tell from there. No, not maple. I don't remember what kind of material it was, but um, basically, I just did some miter joints on each side, and before I shot them in, of course, I added glue, and I just flushed up the base of the shelf with the top of the molding because I just wanted it all to be flush. I didn't want it to be proud. I didn't think that would look nice. So, and then I'm going to use these little spring clamps on these miter joints, and they do suck them in pretty good. These are like the first time I've used them, and I seen them off the Finished Carpentry YouTube channel. That guy used them a lot, and I was like, I'm gonna buy a set. They're freaking cool. Oh, I know a lot of you guys are gonna cringe when you guys are seeing me doing this, and I'm gonna catch a lot of flack, but I'm doing it anyways. I am using dowel pins to attach these breadboard ends. I'm doing two ends on the coffee tabletop. Yeah, I know there's much preferred methods to do this, but for the sake of ease, I'm doing it this method. After I tapped on those breadboard ends, I went ahead and doubled up some of these parallel clamps to clamp them. It worked. Just go ahead and laugh and get it out of your system now. Now you can turn from laughing at me to appreciating what I'm doing, right? I'm using a biscuit joiner, which my suction hose just popped off because I didn't put it on tight enough, to do some little slots, right? And a lot of you guys are going to know those slots are to hold the Z fasteners, right? That I'm going to use to attach the top on to that frame. Here's that 1/2 inch cove molding that I showed you more towards the beginning of the video. So I'm going to go ahead and attach it here. And like I said, you're going to see that you're not going to see this unless you bend down and look underneath it. But I don't know. I like doing trim work like this, and I just wanted to add a nice touch to it, whether you could see it or not. I know it's there. You'll know it's there. You can get some practice on trim work, if anything. Look at that. Look at how nice it is. Why not? Shifting back to everybody's favorite part of woodworking, more sanding. So on that seam where I did that trim on the bottom shelf, I put putty in between that seam, let it dry, and I sanded it all flush. So that way when I paint it, that seam is 100% gone. You will never see it. All right, so I don't have a drum sander big enough to flatten this out, and I don't have a shop nearby that I can take this to run it through a drum sander. So I got a chisel, cleaned up all the glue that I didn't get from wiping it down, and I'm using this angle grinder with like I think it's a 7-inch soft wheel, and it has Velcro on it, right? So I ordered a ton of discs, and I'm starting with 150 grit, and believe it or not, it works pretty quick. One, and you'll be surprised at how flat and nice this thing gets it. It takes me one sheet of sandpaper for each side at the given grit and like 5 to 7 minutes of flattening it out. And unless you really touch every square inch of this thing, you're not going to find like crazy high or low spots. Like I'm telling you, it's an alternative if you don't have any other like way to flatten this big piece out. So don't hate on my game. All right, so after I was finished sanding it out. I did like 150 and I jumped up to 240. For whatever reason, that sandpaper, like 240, did not seem like 240. It seemed much lower. I took it over to my table saw with that joining jig. I made it true on two sides. I ripped it to 32 inches wide, and then I am cutting that other side so it is 55 inches long. And here it is just mocked up before I do finish work. And, just right off the top, the time and effort I put into this thing compared to like one of those 2x4 X coffee tables I've done before, I almost think this one's quicker and easier. So here I am, I'm using my Wagner paint gun and some paint, and I'm doing 3 coats of cabinet paint on this base, and it is in semi-gloss. I prefer to use the paint gun on stuff like this because you get no brush marks and it gets in all those nooks and crannies and trim work. So on to staining and finishing the top. My wife took days and a couple of these little test stain jars just to find the color that she wanted. So this base was Flagstaff. Then she's doing a antique whitewash on top of that after it dried. Then we went ahead and did pickling whitewash. So it's like 3 kinds of stains layered. And then I did 3 coats of semi-gloss in that polyurethane. So, like I said, it is crazy hot in my garage and probably too hot to do that polyurethane. So you can see some of those brush lines. Because I got kind of lazy and I cleaned up like my paint booth and I didn't want to pull it out the next day. So I was like, it's just the top. I'll just brush it. So I actually kind of shot myself in the foot. It just took me a lot longer to sand those brush marks out with 220 grit sandpaper or the sponge. So they're all gone. Than it would have been just, a couple shots with the paint gun. It all leveled out nice and it would have been a little bit better. It turned out the same. It was just more work on my end because how hot my garage was. So those lines you see in this clip, it's kind of deceiving. Those are like the whitewash lines, not like a crappy polyurethane job. So what I like to do is I like to get a finishing wax. This one was bare, and I like to get some like steel wool and go along the grain, knock off any high spots down. It's almost like a super fine sandpaper, so it takes even more brush lines out that you don't get. Rub it in, then get a nice cloth, rub some more wax on there, let it dry for like 10-15 minutes, and then buff it off, and it gives it a really nice finisher top. So if you don't do that, try it out. And that Johnson's finishing paste is just as good. So, all right. So here I am just aligning my base to my top, and I plan this out to have 1.5 inch overhang on all sides. So once I got that 1.5 inch overhang on this first corner and roughed in on the other ones, I put 1 or 2 of these Z-clip fasteners in, or these Z fasteners, just to hold it in place before I I went around and did the other ones, right? Because I did this one, I went to the opposite leg, made sure it was 1.5 inch overhang, put one there, and then I went around and did them all. So to put these in, it's super simple. You just orient the hole down. I pressed a little hole in them, got the screw, zipped them down, and easy. I'm telling you, this is a nice way of doing it. And it allows for that wood shifting during seasonal changes and temperature and humidity, right? And with screwing down the last few Z fasteners and flipping this thing over and slapping in the house, it's done. Super easy, right? Like nothing crazy hard about it. And I think, like I said, I think it's quicker than those rustic coffee tables that everybody's building. But anyways, hey, if you made it to the end of the video, thank you. I appreciate it. If you learned something and you build this yourself, awesome. I appreciate that too. If you would do me a favor and smash that like button and subscribe, I would appreciate it, right? Because that's what keeps me going. Those thumbs up, those shares, everything like that, those comments, good or bad, tell me I'm doing something terrible, and I appreciate them all the same. But thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking it out to the end, and we'll see you next time on the Rustic Anchor Woodworks channel.